Hi everyone, my name is Mara Hensley. I'm 31 years old and I've been sitting on this story for the better part of a decade because honestly, every time I tried to tell it, I didn't know where to start. It sounds unbelievable when you say it out loud. Like people hear it and they tilt their head and they go, "Wait, are you serious?" And I have to say, yes. Yes, I am completely serious. My mother started charging me rent. Not when I was 18, not when I graduated college and moved back home. No, she started charging me rent the day I turned 14 years old. 14? I was still in the 8th grade. I still slept with a stuffed rabbit named Crumbles that I'd had since I was 6. I was still figuring out how to use a straightening iron without burning my ears. And my mother sat me down at the kitchen table on my birthday, slid a piece of paper across to me, and told me that living in this house was going to start costing me something. I want you to really sit with that image for a second, because I've spent years sitting with it. A child, a birthday, a bill. And if you're already asking yourself, how does a 14-year-old even pay rent? I want you to keep watching, because what comes next is somehow even worse. Let me give you some background, because this didn't come out of nowhere. Or maybe it did. That's the thing about growing up in a home like mine. You genuinely can't tell what was intentional and what was just chaos disguised as parenting. My mom's name is Diane Hensley. She was a 37-year-old single mother when this all started. My dad had left when I was 9. Not dramatically, no big blowout fight, no slamming doors. He just sort of faded, stopped coming home on time, then stopped coming home most nights. Then one Tuesday, he packed a bag and said he was going to stay at a friend's place, and I didn't see him again for almost 2 years. My parents never officially divorced until I was 12. So for about 3 years, it was this weird purgatory where mom was essentially alone but wouldn't call herself alone. She was bitter about it in the way that certain people carry bitterness, quietly like a stone in a shoe they refuse to remove. My brother Caleb was born 2 years after me. He was 12 when I was 14. And I need you to understand something about Caleb right now, because it matters enormously to everything that follows. Caleb was my mother's favorite, not in the soft, unspoken way that some families have, where maybe mom seems a little warmer to one kid, but you could be reading into it. No, this was explicit. This was disgust. My mother had a nickname for Caleb, her sunshine. She had never, not once in my memory, had a nickname for me. Caleb was the kid who could do no wrong. If he broke something, it was an accident. If I broke something, it was carelessness. If he forgot his homework, the school was being unreasonable. If I forgot mine, I was irresponsible. Caleb got the new school shoes. I got the ones from the church donation bin that smelled like other people's feet. And honestly, I had normalized all of it by the time I was 10. I just thought that was how family worked. I thought I was the difficult one. I thought I was the one who needed to earn my place. I didn't realize until much, much later that that was exactly what my mother wanted me to think. So back to my birthday. My 14th birthday, Mom had made a cake, yellow cake with chocolate frosting from a can. I remember thinking it was a good sign. She'd made an effort. Caleb gave me a card he'd drawn himself with a purple crayon, which was genuinely sweet. And after dinner, after the cake, after I blew out the candles, Mom said, "Mara, I need to talk to you about something important. Something grown up." I thought she was going to talk to me about boys. I thought she was going to give me some embarrassing puberty conversation. I was already bracing myself. She slid the piece of paper across the table. It was handwritten. In her neat, careful cursive. At the top it said, "Household Contribution Agreement." Beneath that was a list. Rent, $50 per month. Grocery contribution, $20 per month. Utilities share, $15 per month. Utilities share, $15 per month. Personal laundry usage, $5 per month. Total, $90 per month. I stared at it for a long time. "What is this?" I asked. You're 14 now, she said, like that explained everything. You're old enough to understand that nothing in life is free. I'm teaching you responsibility. Every adult pays for where they live. You're going to start understanding that. I looked at Caleb. He was eating the last of the birthday cake, completely unbothered. Does Caleb have to pay too? I asked. My mother's expression shifted. Just slightly, that micro tightening around the eyes. Caleb is 12, she said. He's still a child. I'm 14, I said. I'm still a child. I'm still a child. You're mature for your age, she said, and I want you to notice how she said that like it was a compliment. Like calling me mature was a gift she was giving me. Like she wasn't actively using it to justify taking money from her own eighth grader. You can handle this. You've always been the responsible one. And here's the thing that haunts me about that moment. I didn't argue more than that because I had been trained, absolutely conditioned, to believe that arguing with my mother was futile and would only result in her deciding I was difficult. So I looked at that piece of paper. I nodded, and I said, okay, $90 a month. I was 14 years old, and I had just agreed to pay rent. Now you're probably wondering, where is a 14-year-old supposed to get $90 a month? And the answer is, I figured it out because I had no other choice. Our neighbor, Mrs. Patricia Alvarado, was 72, and her husband had recently passed. She needed someone to come by 3 times a week and help with groceries, light housekeeping, making sure her medications were sorted. She paid me $25 per visit, cash. That was $75 a week if I went 3 times, which I did every week without fail for 2.5 years. I also babysat for 2 families on our street. I helped my history teacher grade papers one semester for a small stipend. I sold handmade friendship bracelets at school for a while. Don't laugh. I was getting $3 each, and at peak I was moving like 10 a week. The point is, I became, at 14, a working person. While my friends were at sleepovers and football games and doing normal 8th grade things, I was counting quarters and managing a schedule. I kept a little notebook where I tracked my earnings and my expenses, which was just the rent money I owed my mom. I was meticulous about it. I was proud of it, actually. Back then, I thought I was learning something valuable. What I was actually learning was how to be invisible, how to make myself useful so that I couldn't be discarded. Because here's what my mother never told me, what I only figured out years later when I was sitting in a therapist's office at 24, crying about things I thought I'd processed. She didn't need that money. She wasn't struggling that badly. She had a job as an office manager at a dental practice. She made decent money. We weren't rich, but we weren't desperate. The rent she charged me wasn't about survival. It wasn't even really about teaching me responsibility. It was about making me feel like I owed her. And if you've ever dealt with a parent like that, a parent who needs you to feel permanently indebted, then I don't have to explain how deep that goes. You already know. The summer I turned 15, the fees went up. She called it a cost of living adjustment. I am not kidding. She used that phrase. She sat me down again, same table, different piece of paper, and told me that with inflation and rising utility costs, my contribution needed to increase to $120 per month. I asked her as carefully as I could if maybe Caleb could start contributing something too. He was 13 by then. I said it gently. I said it like I wasn't angry. Caleb has asthma, she said. He can't be running around doing odd jobs. The stress isn't good for him. Caleb's asthma was mild. He played video games for 6 hours a day without issue. But okay, I added more babysitting shifts. By the time I was 16, I had a real part-time job. I got hired at a bakery 3 blocks from our school. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday mornings, 6 to 11 a.m. I was making about $280 a month, and I was paying my mother $140 of it. She had raised my rate again. She said it was because I was now a wage earner, and the contribution scale should reflect that. I want to pause here and be really honest with you about something, because I think it matters. I was not miserable every single day. I want you to know that, because I don't want to paint a picture of unrelenting darkness, because that's not how these things work, and you wouldn't believe me anyway. There were good days. There were moments where my mother was warm and funny, and she'd make her famous chili on Sunday nights, and we'd watch movies together on the couch, and I'd think, okay, this is fine. This is my family. This is just how we are. Those good days were real, and they were also part of the trap. Because they kept me from seeing clearly. They kept me thinking that if I just did enough, if I just contributed enough, if I was just responsible enough and mature enough and quiet enough, eventually she'd look at me the way she looked at Caleb. Eventually I'd be sunshine too. I was 16 and I was still chasing that. Let me tell you about the night I stopped chasing it. It was a Tuesday in October. I was 16, and I had worked the bakery shift that morning and gone straight to school and then straight to Mrs. Alvarado's house after school to help her with some things. I got home around 7, tired in that bone-deep way. The teenagers shouldn't be tired. But I was always tired by then. My mom was at the kitchen table with a bottle of wine, which wasn't unusual. Caleb was playing games in his room, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that there was an envelope on the table. "That came for you today," my mom said, nodding at it without looking up from her wine glass. I picked it up. It was from the county art competition. I had entered a drawing I'd done. I was always drawing. It was the one thing that was entirely mine. A charcoal piece I'd spent 3 months on of Mrs. Alvarado's hands. I hadn't told anyone I'd entered because I didn't want to deal with the questions or the inevitable disappointment if I didn't place. I opened the envelope. Second place. I had won second place in the county high school art competition. There was a certificate and a note about a $200 scholarship award that would be deposited into a savings account in my name. I stood there in the kitchen holding the letter, and I felt this incredible rush of something. Pride, I think. Pure, uncomplicated pride in something I had made. "What is it?" my mother asked. I showed her the letter. She read it, set it down on the table, took a sip of wine. $200, she said. "That's good. You can put that toward next month's contribution. Maybe get ahead a little." I stood very still. I said, "That's my scholarship money." She said, "And you live in my house." I said very quietly, so I didn't cry, "I just want to keep it." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and her expression wasn't cruel exactly. It was something almost worse than cruel. It was indifferent. Like the conversation bored her. "Mara," she said, "I have been carrying this household essentially alone since your father left. I work full-time. I pay the mortgage. I pay for your food, your school supplies, your health insurance. The least you can do is contribute fairly." She paused. "I thought you understood that by now." I picked up the letter. I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. I said good night. I went to my room and I closed the door and I sat on my bed next to Crumbles, the rabbit, and I made a decision. I was getting out of this house. No matter what it took, no matter how long it took, I was leaving and I was never going to let anyone make me feel like owing them was the same as being loved. I want to tell you about Caleb because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, did he know? Did he see it? Yes and no. Caleb wasn't a bad person. I want to be really careful about that because it would be easy to make him a villain in this story, and that's not exactly accurate. He was a kid who had been raised to believe he was special, and kids who are raised that way don't usually question it. He didn't know I was paying rent for years. I never told him because I was embarrassed and because I think somewhere deep down I was afraid that if he knew and said nothing, it would hurt even more than not knowing. When he did find out, and I'll tell you when that was, his reaction told me everything I needed to know about who he'd become. But that's later. I graduated high school with a 3.7 GPA, which I am honestly still proud of, given that I was working 25 hours a week throughout most of it. I had saved, by that point, a little over $4,000. That was money my mother didn't know about. Cash earnings I had quietly been redirecting into an account she didn't have access to after she'd assumed the art scholarship money was hers. I had applied to 4 colleges. I got into 3. I chose Millbrook State because they offered me a partial scholarship and I could supplement it with loans and work study. I told my mother in April of my senior year that I would be leaving in August. She did not congratulate me. She did not say she was proud. What she said was, "I'll need you to cover June and July's contribution before you leave, since you won't be here to pay it going forward. And there's the matter of your room. I'll need to repaint and likely replace the carpet, so there's a damage deposit situation we should probably work out." I am not making this up. I paid June and July. I didn't fight the damage deposit. She decided that was $75, which she kept from my last month's rent. I left for college in August with $3,200 in savings, a car I'd bought for $800 that I prayed daily would not fall apart, and precisely 0 tears on the drive to campus. The moment I crossed the county line, I felt something physically leave my chest, like a knot I'd been holding for so long I'd forgotten it was there, had finally, suddenly come loose. I cried then. I pulled into a rest stop 30 miles from home, and I sat in my dying car and I cried for a long time. But they were relief tears. Every single one. College was hard. College was also, genuinely, the best 4 years of my life to that point. I worked 2 jobs the whole time. I was used to that. I actually thrived on the structure of it. There was something comforting about earning money and knowing every cent of it belonged to me. I got good grades. I made real friends for the first time, people who didn't know my history and just liked who I was as a person. I studied graphic design, which felt like the most natural extension of all those years I'd spent drawing to make myself feel human. I went home for Thanksgiving freshman year. That was the last time I went home for any holiday for a while. My mother, within the first 20 minutes of my arrival, informed me that since I was home for the week, she felt it was reasonable for me to contribute something to the household. She presented this as a joke. She even laughed a little when she said it, but she was watching my face with that particular sharpness she always had, and I understood she was not joking. I said, "Mom, I'm in college. I don't have money." She said, "Everyone has some money." I said, "I have to go." I drove back to campus that Sunday instead of Wednesday. I told my friends I'd stayed because I needed to catch up on a project. I told myself I was fine. I called home less and less frequently over the next 2 years. Something shifted between my mother and me during my junior year. She called me one evening unprompted, which was unusual. And she was different on the phone. Softer, warmer. She asked how my classes were going. She asked if I was eating enough. She said she'd been thinking about me. And I want to be honest, it worked on me a little. Because no matter how much you intellectually understand that someone has been using you, the emotional part of you, the part that is still 12 years old and wants her mom to call her sunshine, that part doesn't get the memo right away. We had a few good phone calls over the next couple months. She told me about things at work. She mentioned that Caleb was struggling in his junior year of high school, that he was getting poor grades and pushing back a lot. I sympathized. I sent Caleb a card saying I was thinking about him. Then one evening she called and she mentioned, sort of casually, that she'd gotten behind on a few bills. The mortgage had been a problem for a couple months. She was looking for options. She asked if I could possibly help. I was 20 years old. I had $600 in my account and 2 jobs and student loan debt. I said I was sorry, but I couldn't. The warmth evaporated instantly. She said I was selfish. She said she had sacrificed everything for me and Caleb. She said she didn't know how I could sleep at night knowing my mother was struggling. She said this was why she'd tried to teach me financial responsibility. Because life was hard and you couldn't just expect people to carry you. The irony of that last part was so perfect it almost felt staged. I got off the phone. I sat in my dorm room for a while, and then I wrote a letter, not an email, an actual letter, on paper, to my mother. I wrote it carefully and I rewrote it twice. I told her in full how I had felt being charged rent as a child. I told her about the art scholarship. I told her about the damage deposit. I told her that I understood she had been struggling as a single mother, and I didn't hate her for being overwhelmed. But that which she had done to me wasn't teaching me responsibility. It was using me. And I needed her to understand the difference. I mailed it. She never acknowledged it. Not once, not ever. But she stopped calling for almost a year. I graduated at 22 with a degree in graphic design and a job offer from a small but growing agency in Clover City, about 4 hours from home. I I rented my first apartment, an actual apartment that was mine, with a lease in my name, and I felt like I could finally breathe all the way down. I became good at my job. Really good. Within 3 years, I had been promoted twice and was heading up design for the agency's largest accounts. I bought my own car, a real one, not a prayer on wheels. I started a retirement account because nobody had ever told me about those growing up, and I was going to have to make up for lost time. I had, by 26, built a life that felt solid and entirely mine. My relationship with my mother was distant, but not totally severed. We spoke on birthdays and major holidays. I kept the conversations short and surface level. She had developed a talent for pretending the past hadn't happened. She was warm, she was chatty, she asked about my job with genuine curiosity, and it would have been easy to let myself relax into that. But I didn't forget, and I didn't go back. Caleb and I had occasional contact. He'd gotten into community college, dropped out after a semester, and was living at home and working at an auto shop. He called me maybe once a year. The calls were always slightly awkward, like we were two people who shared a language but had forgotten most of the words. Then one day, out of absolutely nowhere, he called me and he said, "Hey, I found some of your old stuff in the basement. There's a notebook. It's like budget stuff from when you were a kid." I went completely still. "What kind of budget stuff?" I asked. "Like rent payments?" he said. "And grocery contributions? Mara, what is this?" And there it was. The moment I had thought about so many times over the years, the moment Caleb found out. I told him everything. I was very calm about it because I'd had a lot of time to process, and I was also not about to let myself be undone by this conversation. I told him about the household contribution agreement. I told him about every rate increase. I told him about the bakery job and Mrs. Alvarado and counting quarters. I told him about the art scholarship. I told him about the damage deposit. There was a long silence. Then he said, "She never charged me anything. I never paid a dime." "I know," I said. "I didn't know she was doing that to you," he said. His voice was strange, tight and confused. "I know," I said again. "Mara, that's—" "Yeah." Another silence. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't know if that's even the right thing to say, but I'm sorry." I told him I appreciated that. I told him I didn't blame him. He had been a kid, and he hadn't made the rules. I told him that what happened between me and our mother was between me and our mother. And then we both just stayed on the line for a moment, two adults processing the fact that they had grown up in completely different houses that shared the same address. That call cracked something open between Caleb and me. Not healed. We were suddenly close. Years of distance don't dissolve in one phone call, but different. More honest. He started calling more often. He told me things were rough with Mom, that she relied on him heavily and he was feeling suffocated, that she had borrowed money from him multiple times and not repaid it, that she would get angry if he made plans without including her. I listened. I did not say, "I told you so." I am very proud of that. I need to tell you about the dinner. When I was 28, I went back to my hometown for a friend's wedding. It was the first time I'd been back in over 4 years. My mother found out through Caleb and called me to ask if I would come to dinner while I was in town. And here's the thing about being a person who grew up the way I grew up, you spend an enormous amount of time wondering if you're being too hard. Wondering if you're the problem. Wondering if maybe you've held a grudge too long, if maybe you owe forgiveness, if maybe you're making yourself the hero of a story where actually everyone is a little bit wrong. I went to dinner. I told myself it was for closure. I told myself I was strong enough. We sat at the same kitchen table. It was surreal. The table was the same, a little more worn, a few more scratches. My old chair still wobbled the same way it always had. My mother looked older. Not badly, just more settled into herself, the way people do when they've stopped fighting something. She had cooked a real meal, pot roast and green beans and rolls from scratch. It felt intentional, like she wanted to remind me she was capable of warmth. We talked carefully around the edges of things for most of the meal. Her job. She'd retired early on a small pension. Caleb's life. My job, which she asked about with what seemed like real interest. Then, over dessert. Apple pie, also from scratch, very intentional. She said, "I've been thinking about apologizing to you." I set down my fork. "I know that some of the things I did when you were young were not what they should have been," she said. She was looking at her hands. "I was struggling. Your father had left, and I was scared, and I think I put things on you that I shouldn't have." I sat very still. "I want to say sorry," she said. "I hope you know I love you. And here is where I need to be really honest with you, because this is the complicated part of me. The 16-year-old part, the part that drew Mrs. Alvarado's hands in charcoal because it was the only thing that was entirely hers, that part wanted to fall apart right there at the kitchen table. Wanted to say thank you, wanted to hug her, wanted to be done carrying it. But the 31-year-old part of me, the woman who had built her life from nothing with her own hands, who had learned to read people carefully because she'd had to, noticed something. The apology had no specifics. "No, I'm sorry I charged you rent at 14. No, I'm sorry I took your scholarship money. No, I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to earn your place in our home. Just, I know things weren't ideal and I love you." That's not an apology. That's a door being opened. I said, "I appreciate that, Mom. Thank you." And that was all I gave her. I drove back to my hotel that night and I called my therapist's voicemail and left a rambling message that I'm sure she appreciated receiving at 9:30 on a Friday. 3 weeks after that dinner, my mother called me and asked if she could borrow money. Not a small amount. $11,000. She needed to catch up on the mortgage. She had apparently fallen significantly behind, and she was facing possible foreclosure. She explained this calmly, like it was practical information we were exchanging, not like she was asking her estranged daughter for $11,000. I asked her why she hadn't mentioned this at dinner. She said she hadn't wanted to ruin the evening. I said I needed to think about it. I did think about it. I thought about it for 3 days, and what I thought about most was this. My mother had charged me rent from the age of 14 to the age of 18. Over 4 years, her rates had varied, but at minimum she had collected somewhere around $5,000 from me, a child, while my brother paid nothing. $5,000 that I had earned, literally penny by penny, doing other people's laundry and babysitting other people's children and getting up at 6 a.m. to ice cakes at a bakery before school. $5,000 plus compound interest, plus 4 years of a childhood I didn't fully get to have. I called her back. I said, "Mom, I'm not going to lend you money, but I want to talk to you about something first." She said, "Okay." I said, "From the time I was 14 to 18, I paid you approximately $5,000 in rent and household contributions. That money was earned by a child, your child, while Caleb paid nothing. I want you to acknowledge that." Silence. "That was different," she finally said. "That was about teaching you." "I know what you called it," I said. "I'm asking you to acknowledge what it actually was." More silence. Longer this time. "I don't know what you want from me, Mara," she said, and her voice had gone flat. The warmth from the dinner was completely gone. "I don't want anything from you," I said. And this is the part I want you to really hear, because it took me a long time to get here. A long time in therapy and a lot of ugly crying and a lot of journaling and a few conversations with friends who were honest with me even when it was uncomfortable. I genuinely don't want anything from you. I've built a life. I'm okay. But I need you to understand that I'm not able to give you $11,000. And it's not because I don't have it. It's because I've already given you more than I should have. And I'm not going to keep the cycle going." She hung up. Caleb called me 2 days later. He was upset, not at me. I want to be clear. He was upset because Mom had called him immediately after hanging up on me and had told him that I was cold and punishing her for old mistakes and that he needed to talk sense into me. Caleb, to his credit, did not try to talk sense into me. What he said was, "I found out she's also been taking money from me and not paying it back. About 3,000 over the past year. She calls it borrowing, but she doesn't keep track of it and she gets angry if I bring it up. I let that settle." "Caleb," I said, "you see it now, right? You see the pattern?" A pause. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I see it." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," he said. "I still live close. I can't just—" "You can," I said. "You can," I said. "You can. Not easily, and not without guilt. But you can. And she'll be okay. She'll find a way, because people like her always do. But you have to decide if you're going to keep being the one she leans on at the expense of yourself." He didn't answer that day, but I could hear him thinking. I want to jump forward now, about a year, because that's when things came to a head in a way I did not expect. My mother did not lose the house. She negotiated with the bank and got a loan modification. I found this out through Caleb, who found it out when she casually mentioned it. No foreclosure. No crisis. She'd had options all along. She just preferred to ask me first. That stung a little, I won't lie, but it also confirmed what I'd suspected. It wasn't about need. It was about the transaction. About keeping me in the position of person who owes her. What I did not expect was what happened in the spring of that year. My company had been growing steadily, and in March they offered me a partnership. A junior partnership, but still, a stake in the business I'd been helping build for 6 years. It came with a significant pay increase and, for the first time in my life, the kind of financial security I'd only ever dreamed about back in the days of counting quarters for rent money. I accepted. I celebrated, quietly, with my closest friends, a dinner at a restaurant I couldn't have afforded 2 years ago. And somehow, through the particular grapevine that connects all families no matter how estranged, my mother found out. She called me. She was warm, effusive, thrilled. She said she always knew I'd be successful. She said she was so proud. She said she'd been telling her friends at church about her daughter, the businesswoman. Then she said she'd been having some health issues lately. Nothing too serious, but the medical bills were adding up. She was wondering if now that things were going so well for me, maybe I could help a little bit. And here's the thing. Here's the thing that I need you to understand, because I think it's the most important part of this entire story. I was not angry in that moment. I had been angry many times over many years. But that day on the phone, I was just tired. Tired of the same conversation. Tired of the same pattern. Tired of being seen not as a daughter but as a resource. I said, "Mom, I'm going to say something, and I want you to hear me." "Okay," she said. "I love you." "I do. And I have spent a lot of years being angry at you, and I've spent a lot of time processing that anger, and I'm in a place now where I'm mostly past it, but I am never going to be a financial solution for you. Not because I'm punishing you and not because I've stopped caring, but because every time I think we're building something real, a real relationship, a real connection, I find out that you needed something. And I can't do that anymore. I need a mother, not a transaction." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I gave you everything I had." And I thought about the notebook in the basement, the household contribution agreement, the art scholarship, the damage deposit, the warm dinners that preceded the asks, the apology that had no specifics. I said, "Mom, you charged me rent when I was 14. She said nothing. I said, "I think we both need some time." And I hung up. Caleb called me 3 months later. He'd moved out of the town where we grew up. A new city, a new job, a girlfriend he sounded genuinely happy about. He was going to therapy, his own idea. He said it was helping him see things he hadn't been able to see before. He also said our mother had called him 6 times in the past week because she was feeling lonely and hadn't been sleeping well and wanted him to come visit. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her I needed some space," he said. She cried. I felt terrible. "I know," I said. "That feeling doesn't mean you're wrong. Does it get easier?" he asked. I thought about it honestly. "Different," I said. "It gets different. Easier is a complicated word." He laughed a little sadly. "I keep thinking," he said, "about that notebook. About you being 14 and paying rent. And I feel so guilty, Mara. Like, I benefited. I got to just be a kid and you didn't." "You were a kid," I said. "It wasn't your job to fix it." "Still," he said. "I know," I said. "Still. Here's where I am today and where I'll leave you. I'm 31. I'm a partner at my firm. I have a beautiful apartment that I have filled, slowly, with things I chose deliberately. A good couch, real art on the walls, a kitchen where I cook dinner on Sunday evenings and nobody presents me with a contribution schedule afterward. I have friends who know my history and love me anyway. I have a therapist I've been seeing for 6 years who has helped me understand piece by piece the difference between what I was taught love was and what love actually is. My relationship with my mother is minimal. We exchange brief messages on important dates. I have not seen her in 2 years. I'm not sure when or if that will change. Caleb and I talk almost every week now. He's doing well. His girlfriend is kind. He's beginning to understand who he is outside of being his mother's sunshine, and it's complicated, but I can hear him growing through it. We went to visit Mrs. Alvarado together last fall. She's 87 now and still sharp as a tack. And she hugged me for a long time and said, "I always knew you were going to be something, girl." I cried a little into her shoulder. She patted my back and told me it was okay. "It's okay. I need you to hear that. Because if you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, if you were the responsible one, the mature one, the one who was handed bills instead of grace, I need you to hear this. The way you were treated was not a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of someone else's limitations. And whatever it took to survive that, whatever you carried, you were allowed to put it down. You were always allowed to put it down. I used to think the most powerful thing I would ever do was get out of that house, and getting out was important. It was necessary. It was survival. But the actually powerful thing, the thing that took years longer and cost so much more than rent money, was learning to stop paying. Stop paying in anxiety. Stop paying in guilt. Stop paying in 100 small performances of gratitude for love that should have been unconditional. Stop calculating what you owe just to exist in someone's life. That's what I'm still working on. Every day, a little more. Every day, putting down a little more of what isn't mine to carry. If this story resonated with you, if you've lived something like it, with a parent, a partner, a sibling, anyone who made you feel like belonging came with a price tag, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what part hit hardest? Tell me where you are in your own story, because this channel exists for exactly that reason, so that voices like mine and like yours get to be heard. And if you know someone who needs to hear this right now, please share it. You never know who's counting quarters somewhere and just needs to know they're not alone. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.